Well, today's lecture is about English vowel qualities and vowel contrasts. This is always a difficult lecture in a sense for me to give, because some of you know lots and lots about this and others of you don't. The English vowel system is very complex, looked at from a universal, from a world point of view. Many languages have just a small number of vowels. Spanish, Japanese, you've got I, E, A, or U, that's it. Some languages have even fewer, Arabic. But English has a complex vowel system, including diphthongs, but certainly with at least, my kind of English, 12 different basic vowel sounds, not counting diphthongs. So, I can get this to move on. How can we find some order among this large number of vowels? The first thing I want to draw your attention to is that the vowels fall into two different groups depending on what kind of syllable they can occur in. Most of our vowels are fine in what we call open syllables, that is, syllables with no final consonant. So we have words like see, bar, stir, day, and know. All of these are perfectly good words in English, perfectly good syllables from the point of view of the phonetics. Now, the vowels that are okay without a final consonant are the long vowels and the diphthongs. So this is a way of separating out the long vowels and diphthongs on the one hand from the short vowels on the other hand, without considering their actual length, their actual duration. This is nothing to do with how long the sound lasts. This is to do with its privileges of occurrence, the kind of positions in which it can occur. Because when we then look at the short vowels, we will find that they cannot occur in English without a following consonant. So it's not a possible stressable separate word to have sin. That's not a possible word in English. If you add a consonant, sit, or sick, or sit, that's fine. But without a consonant, it's not. There's no word bad in English, nor could there be. Although we can have bad, and back, and bat, and so on. There's no word stuck in English. Although we do have words like stuck and stun. No word dead. But we do have death and debt and deck and depth. No word not, although we do have knock and not and nostalgia. Anyhow, these short vowels then, as we say, need a coda. The coda is the name for the final consonant in the syllable. So what we've seen so far is that English vowels in general fall into two categories: those that don't need a coda, though they can have one, and those that do require a coda. And the second group are what are traditionally called the short vowels. There are vowel plots of the English vowels. These are based on Daniel Jones's cardinal vowel system, which some of you will know about, and it shows the approximate positions of the English vowels with reference to those fixed auditory qualities, the cardinal vowels. Generally speaking, this also corresponds to the position of the tongue, whether it's close to the roof of the mouth at the top or a long way away, open vowels at the bottom, and whether the highest point is at the front, on the left side, or at the back of the tongue, on the right side. And I've split them up into four groups which correspond to the four boxes on the lecture handout. Among your the documents in your booklet, course book, you've got the handout for this lecture which shows you those four schematic diagrams of these vowels. How are they divided? Well, we've already seen how we sort out the short vowels. They're the ones that do require a coda. The other ones, the long vowels and diphthongs, don't require a coda, but they can have one if necessary. And I've divided these according to the final tendency. Do they move towards a close front quality, an E sort of quality? That gives us the top right-hand box with E, A, I, Oi. Or do they move towards a back close quality, which gives us oo and o and ow? The dotted one is o, which occurs before L for some speakers. You could ignore that for the moment. The fourth box shows you those that tend towards a mid-central quality. So like and bird. This gives us ear, air, and or. Well, R doesn't actually move towards the centre, but it doesn't move towards the closed area. Perhaps that's a more accurate description of these. So now what we can do is go through them individually. These are the vowels that can occur in stressed syllables. We look at unstressed syllables in a minute. And in stressed syllables, forgive the animation, it came with a gift. That's a drum kit. Kit. Other words with I, bid, him, minute, finishing. Now, the point about the vowels that I'm presenting to you now is that each of them has to be different from every other one. They're all in contrast with one another, because in a stressed syllable, choosing one or the other can make a difference to the meaning of the word. Okay, that's the kit vowel. Kit being the standard lexical set, which I think Ashby explained to you, the key word we use to refer to the whole set of words that have that vowel. The dress vowel, dress, bed, head, many, redhead, different from E. We've got distinctions like between bid, when you offer in an auction a bid, and a bed that you sleep on. Which is also different from bad, not good. The A vowel, the trap vowel, trap, bad, carry, canal, hang. That's a picture of a mouse trap. Trap. The strut vowel. Strut, mud, love, blood, double, shut up. And many of you will need to pay particular attention to the difference between trap, bad, carry, canal, hang, and up, strut, mud, love, blood, double, shut up. This is a summer course and not a summer course. The lot vowel, odd, lot, odd, wash, stopwatch, cross, squad. If you look back at the handout sheet, you will see that we've been gradually making the vowels opener. In is fairly close, e is mid, a is open, o is also open, but now back. And the last of these, which is o, goes back to being fairly close again. The foot vowel, as in foot, good, put, couldn't, full, book. Well, that's pretty straightforward. There they are all together, the 6 stressable short vowels of English. Now what about the long vowels? Well, some of them are very easy. The fleece vowel, fleece, see, machine, seen, complete, dream. A, also quite easy. Face, say, break, train, payday, faded. And I, price, high, try, tidy, white wine. Those 3 vowels seem to be actually easy for almost everybody. We didn't spend too much time on them. Notice that In A and I, we've got diphthongs, which move from a starting point to an end point, so that the I of price starts as A, and then goes towards E, price. How far it gets depends on how fast you're speaking. Price ends up typically about E, price, which is why we write it that way. Oi, also easy, choice, boy, noisy, boiler, enjoyable, oi. So those are the 4 long vowels in the I group. Then we have the vowels in the UD group. Oh, they're all together. Then the vowels in the... No, before we get on to that, sorry, we need to pay attention to contrasts. We've had these long vowels and we've had these short vowels. Well, it's very important in English to make the difference between them, because otherwise you're going to confuse sheep, which is an animal, and ship, which is a vessel. Sheep and ship. Similarly, there's a contrast between green, a colour, and grin, kind of smile. Cheek, on your face, chick, baby animal. Read and rid. Just check that you can all hear that difference. On the left is sheep, on the right is ship. Which side is ship? Right. Which side is ship? Right. Which side is sheep? Left. Which side is sheep? Left. Which side is ship? Right. Yeah. On the left, is that a ship? No, it's a sheep. Is it a sheep? Is it a sheep? Is it a ship? No. Okay, well you're all on top of that. That's excellent. By the way, that's a kind of game which you can use with quite young learners. You know, using pictures, you have to hear the difference. And of course, it's very important to get early training in hearing the contrast between the two sounds for those for whom it's difficult. There are materials available that list all these example words. And if this contrast gives particular trouble, well, then you need to do more work on it. And so you could take more minimal pairs, as these are known, like deed, did, and leave, and live, and ease, and is. Read and rid, we've had been and been. Beat and bit, and sheep and ship, and seek and sick, and deep and dip, and each and itch. Notice in those last ones that the important difference is not really duration. The important difference is tensity, quality. In beat, we've got E. In bit, we've got I. That's the crucial difference. Sheep, ship, seek, sick, Particularly important, I think, is the difference between these and this. Now, you know how to use the plural and the singular in writing, but some people tend to say this for both of them in speech. And although we can understand that, it has creates a very bad impression. It sounds foreign, it sounds careless, it sounds annoying. So if you are, for example, Spanish speaking, I think it is worthwhile exercising the difference between these are interesting and this is interesting. These, this, these, this, these, this. Because there are two differences. Vowel quality and the final consonant. These and this. Alright, now finally we get on to the oo group. Oo, goose. Two, blue, group, new, beauty. I'm terribly old-fashioned because you may notice that I pronounce this oo. People who are 50 years younger than me typically say oo, goose, two, blue, group, new, beauty. I hope I'm imitating it correctly. It's not really a back oo type vowel, which is what I tend to use because I'm old. This vowel is changing in English, getting fronter, which in a sense doesn't need to worry you because it means there's a considerable leeway, freedom, as to how back or not so back you make it. The Japanese vowel, u, is different from the English one because in the English one we use our lips and protrude them a bit. Japanese u sometimes has sort of lip u action of some kind, but not like that of English. So you can practice doing oo, 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 but you could whistle through. Those of you who can whistle, if you whistle a low note, oo, that should give you that kind of oo quality. If I were teaching you French, which I'm not, I'd also get you to make a high-pitched whistle. And do that, which would give you the French vowel. But we're not doing French, so we needn't worry about that. Here's another vowel that's a bit variable in English. I say goat, shirt, no, rope, over. I don't know what stone says stone for. That looks like a mistake. I do apologise. I was meant to say stone. The last one is old. The last one is interesting because quite a lot of English people use this special O variety when there's an L after it. So rather than old, which is what I say, people say old. You can do that if you like, but you don't have to. So you can choose either old or old, whichever you prefer. It makes it more like the dark L, because the whole thing is then back and rounded or old. And that also applies in soul and shoulder and gold and so on, which are otherwise cold, shoulder, I forgot what the words are, shoulder, yes. 100 years ago, this vowel was old style for everybody, so you get goat, and shoulder, and so on, rope. If you listen to ancient recordings of Daniel Jones, you can hear him using this kind of quality. Oh no, oh no, oh no. That sounds very old-fashioned. Nowadays, even people of my age say, oh no, we've lost that old rounded throughout quality. So the only people left saying that are Czechs and Russians and whatnot who have sort of inherited that through generations of language teaching. Oh, this is easy really for everybody. Mouth. Now, shout, powder, downtown. I hope you liked my picture. I think it's quite important to use pictures when teaching. It may seem silly and trivial, but somehow it makes it more interesting. And remember that my job is to keep you all awake. And if you're teaching, equally your job is to keep your pupils awake. And silly pictures sometimes help in doing this. And nowadays with Google Images and Flickr and whatnot, you can very quickly find pictures on the web to illustrate anything you might want. Those of you who follow my blog, my phonetic blog on the internet, will know that I try and illustrate each day's posting, just to make it more interesting. Okay, ow. This one, again, there's quite a lot of freedom. For the English, it's going to be full of social significance, exactly whether you say mouth or mouth or mouth or mouth. But from the foreigner's point of view, I don't think it matters at all. Likewise, in America, mouth and mouth has quite an important social meaning, but don't worry about it. So there are our back set, goose, goat, mouth. Now we come on to the vowels that are or move towards the central position. Ear, near, here, weary, dear, severe, period, near. This vowel typically starts about I, which is why we write it like that, but it moves towards near, 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 here, here. Some people have a closer tensor starting point. Near, fear, that's not a disaster if you do that. Others, Australians and now Londoners are doing this too, make it a monophthong and say ne, he, fe, de. I don't know how to recommend that, but if you have a teacher who does that, then no reason why you shouldn't as well. Or if you are living with a family and they do. I always thought this was just Australian, but I've started to hear it in London, so it seems to be on the increase. Then there's air, square, square, fair. Starts at air, goes to air. Various, prepare, despairing. I pronounce this as a diphthong, as you can hear. Square, square. But quite a substantial number of British people now pronounce this as a monophthong and say square, square, fair, share. If that's easier for you, by all means do it, but don't feel you must do it, because there are plenty of people who, like me, pronounce it as a diphthong. There's certainly no need to change the transcription on this account. Some of you may have come across books which transcribe this with the other S symbol and the length mark. Well, fine, but that doesn't indicate any difference of sound really at all. It's just taking the other variant as the norm. Ah, this is easy for everybody. Start, father, farmer, banana, last half. Now, this brings us up against the question of what kind of English we're describing. I'm, of course, describing British English, received pronunciation, Southern British Standard, General British, whatever you like to call it. If your model accent is British, then this is what you should imitate. If, on the other hand, you want to learn American English, then there will be various differences, particularly in vowels. And we all know that Americans don't say last half. The Americans speak of the last half. That's fine if you prefer to say that. What I think is on the whole best, though, is if you could be consistent and don't end up in the middle of the Atlantic with some words British and some words American. Here's another vowel that differs between British and American English, because in my kind of English, it's just a mid-central vowel, not too close, not too open, not too front, not too back. Americans, of course, add colouring to it, so they say which again is fine. So I say nurse, and stir, and learn, and refer, earn, turning, and service. Not many languages in the world have this as a stressable long vowel. But we do in English. That's how it is. Nurse. In American, they've been nurse, stir, learn, prefer. Americans also often round their lips. With this, which we don't in German in English. Smile when you see a girl. The lips spread. Or a nurse, for that matter. Only if you come from South Wales would you use lip rounding, then you might say a nurse, but that's a provincial or regional pronunciation. Or thought, law, health, war, forces, author, order. This is the most rounded vowel in English, one when the lips are really rounded. On the whole, it's not difficult to pronounce. The problem is knowing which words to use it in. And so the second word here, for example, law, sometimes you'll hear people thinking that it should be said as low, but it isn't. That's a different word. It's law. Poor, sure, jury, tourist, furious. Begins goes to Don't make it too close, don't say cure, but cure. And in all of these words, there is now a gradual drift towards saying or instead. So cure, certainly particularly with poor and sure, those are very widespread pronunciations instead of poor and sure. So we're in the middle of change, and you can do what you like, within reason. Then there all are the central vowels. Central tending. Now, what about weak vowels? We have 3 vowels in English that occur only in weak syllables. And these are the I at the end of happy, the U at the end of thank you, and the that occurs in lots of the syllables of common standards for the bananas, which third one we call a schwa. Now, this is a somewhat revolutionary approach to English vowels because some books will not tell you about a special vowel in happy, treat it as just the ordinary kit vowel, or a special vowel in thank you, treat it as the ordinary foot vowel. And I think it's helpful to consider these because they are somewhat different. The main thing about happy is that here the usual contrast between sheep and ship doesn't apply, doesn't operate. So I've got schwas first. Let's just go through schwas. Bananas, collection. Easy once you know how. Difficult if your language doesn't have any such vowel. So in many languages a banana is called banana, or words to that effect. In English it's not a banana, but a banana. Banana. Let's get now down to the happy vowel. E. Yeah. On the left you see we do have this important distinction between green and grin, between sleep and slip, between feeling and filling. In the stressed syllable, you must make that distinction. But at the ends of these words, happy, coffee, valley, unstressed position, it doesn't matter precisely what quality you use. And there are some speakers who use something pretty much like what they have in green and say happy, coffee, valley. There are others who use something pretty much like what they have in grin and say happy, coffee, valley. There are others who use something intermediate, happy, coffee, valley. And there are plenty of people who are inconsistent and switch around, sometimes say happy, sometimes say happy. It doesn't matter. So that's the point about using this special vowel symbol. Some people call it schwee. If is schwa, you see this is schwee. Anyhow, the happy vowel is what I usually call it because it occurs at the end of the word happy. Notice it occurs at the end of all those words and also before vowels in words like glorious. Now, it's very difficult if you force me to say, is this the E vowel of green, fleece? Or is it the I vowel of grin, kit? Is it glorious? Or is it glorious? Well, the trouble is I don't say it as slowly as that. I say glorious. But there's not time to decide which it is. It doesn't matter which it is. Nobody knows which it is. It's a question to ask which it is. So it really applies with the weak forms of words like me, she, he, we. When you say tell me, those who say happy, pretty open here, will also say tell me. Those who say happy, with an E tensor here, will also say tell me. So really this belongs in the same category. And this is only for advanced students. With this group of words, I would say the strong form has E, me, and the weak form has the happy, which often may make no difference, and of course can be ignored from the point of view of most learners. Well, correspondingly at the back, we've got a shwoo, which is the vowel at the end of thank you. Again, U has a strong form with a long oo, but a weak form, that's you. The difference between food and good, look and look, shoot and put, applies in stressed syllables, strong syllables. But in the corresponding positions that we saw with E, happy, we find a corresponding weakening, neutralization, non-distinction. In the case of thank you, situation, is that situation or situation? I really don't know, and it doesn't matter. No contrast, situation, influence, stimulate even. to accept weak form of to before vowels, as this one, to ask, to arrive. So that gives us these three vowels that only occur in weak syllables. This is from your handout. This is reproducing what you've got in front of you in the course book. So we've got this neutralization, that is failure to distinguish, suspension of the contrast between E and E or between U and O. Look at the last line here. We do need to recognize the contrast between strong and weak, because unfortunately in English, you can't say that in all unstressed syllables you get weak vowels. No, in many unstressed syllables you get strong vowels. And there is therefore even a contrast. If I insert something, then it is an insert. An insert is something that's been inserted. And that differs in its second syllable from words like consonant. The first one has cert, the second one has sit. So there's a difference between and schwa. Likewise, there's a difference between strong E in pedigree and the happy vowel in mimicry. Mimicry. At least for speakers like me, there's a very definite, clear, audible difference between pedigree and mimicry. Or indeed between cuckoo, which has a long oo, and thank you, which doesn't. Now, all of this is leading up to a generalization about English vowels, that in many positions, English vowels undergo weakening. Which is to say, they switch from being one of the strong vowels, one of the 20 we looked at at the beginning, into being one of our weak vowels. And again, this is from your handout. We recognize a system of weak vowels as the possible outputs of the process of weakening. So what weak vowels are, is they're the output of the process of weakening. And, just let me see where I've got next. Yes. We've got here the words anatomy and anatomical. Now these words are obviously related to one another. They take the same stem and have different endings. And the consequence of these endings, which affect the stress, is that not only does the stress move around, but the vowel quantities change. So you can think of this word as sort of theoretically anatom plus an ending. But we never actually pronounce anatom, because we weaken depending on where the stress is. So, stress on nat, we get anatomy, anatomy, anatomy. Stress on tom, and rhythmically therefore also on the an, we get anatomical. So, we've got anatom or anatom. And you notice the vowels switching from strong to weak depending on where the stress is. Weakening in morphologically related words like those. Other examples: democratic, democracy, variety, vary, variant, immune, immunize, compete, competitive, competition. But it also operates in function words with their strong form and weak form. Always the strong form has a strong vowel, the weak form has a weak vowel. So can, weak form can, of, weak form of, then, weak form them, are, me, you. And furthermore, there are many words in English where we disagree about how to pronounce them, or we vary from time to time about how we say them, where the choice is between a strong or a weak vowel. So in the names of the days of the week, we can say Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday with strong day, or we can say Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday with D, which is the corresponding weak vowel. And we see the same thing in the names of the months. September, September, November, November. In the unstressed position, you have a choice whether to weaken it. Even, it's very interesting to look at what happens when people sing. Church provides you a good opportunity to hear people singing hymns about, sometimes, angels. And when singing, people don't sing angel, they sing angel. Angels from the realms of glory. Everything is strong in singing, everything that can be really, and so people say angel, even though in real life, in ordinary pronunciation, nobody would dream of saying angel, it's only angel, with schwa L or syllabic L, angel. We know that it's an A, of course, in some abstract sense, because we have the adjective angelic, which tells us, but no. We clearly do have this process of weakening in English, and that's why we have weak vowels. Now, a complication is that as well as those three vowels that we've looked at, those three vowels, we can also have I and U in weak positions. So we probably have to recommend treating them too as possible weak vowels. They belong both to the strong and the weak system. In a word like finishing, the first vowel, fin, is strong, but the second two are arguably weak, finishing, even though they all sound the same. Basic, valid, distress. Stimulus, that sounds like U, but it must be weak. Executive, virulent. In the case of weak U, there always nowadays seem to be alternatives with plain schwa, which perhaps has a slightly different social connotation, that is saying stimulus, executive, virulent, or if you drop the yod, of course, then that's even more socially marked, executive. So I want to recommend that we treat both I and U as belonging to the strong and to the weak systems. Important point 4.3, a stressed syllable must contain a strong vowel, but the converse does not hold. This is where English is importantly different from Russian, for example. In Russian you've got similar weakening, but you know that in the stressed syllable you're going to get a strong vowel, and in the other vowel, in the other syllables, depending on how far away they are, you get various kinds of weakening. But in Russian it's sort of automatic. In English it isn't, because we have these various syllables that have strong vowels even though they're not stressed. Compounds, bedtime. Time obviously doesn't weaken. Acorn, the fruit of an oak tree. You might think it would be an acorn or an acorn, but it's neither of those things. It's an acorn. Acorn. Colleague, stressed on the co, but the E remains strong. Colleague. Chemicals like sulfate. Words like gymnast doesn't weaken. Even the noun torment. All the other words with M-E-N-T have ment, government, assignment, placement, and so on. But torment is different because it comes from the verb to torment. Right, let's do something more exciting. Syllabic consonants. How do we pronounce the word suddenly? That's how we say it, suddenly. How many syllables? How many syllables does it contain? Well, it contains 3 syllables. Suddenly. 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 Generally speaking, for each syllable, we expect to find a vowel. So, how is it that we can have 3 syllables in suddenly, but apparently only 2 vowels, and e? Well, the answer is that the N in this word is syllabic. That is, it behaves like a vowel. Suddenly. We could say suddenly, but generally speaking we don't. We don't say suddenly, we say suddenly. Suddenly. And you should try and do the same if you can. Suddenly, suddenly. Because we have a process in English which I call syllabic consonant phonetics, which takes schwa and a nasal, and from them produces a syllabic N, a syllabic nasal. We have this in words like garden, and sudden, and hidden, and so on. Have you got some more? Yes. This applies with the other nasal, with M, blossom, blossom, with schwa and L, medal gives you medal, and schwa and R, gathering gives you gathering. It's most important really for the N's and L's. There seems to have been a change over the last half century in that people are using fewer syllabic consonants. For people of my age, we always say God, God. But I hear younger people quite often saying garden, garden, which to me is baby pronunciation. Things are changing clearly. This is good news for you if you find it difficult to do nasal release, which is what we have here, going straight from the D to the N, garden, garden, because that's the consequence if you make a syllabic nasal here. You have to go directly from the D to the N, garden, which means moving what organ of speech? Not the tongue, garden, not the vocal cords, but the soft palate. The difference between D and N is whether the air can get out through the nose. In a D, the air is blocked because the soft palate's raised. Garden. If you lower the soft palate, the air can come out through the nose. Garden, garden. Now, you've all got to learn to do this where the N is not syllabic, words like Sydney, capital of Australia. Is it the capital? No, anyhow. Major city in Australia, Canberra's the capital. Major city in Australia, Sydney. And if you're Japanese and think of it as Sydney or something, then you must. Sydney, 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 Sydney has nasal release. And so I have words like goodness. Goodness. Well, it's the same thing in garden or so. We see then that we've got in English a lot of vowels, but in some positions this vast range is considerably restricted because we can only use weak vowels. The weak vowels are perhaps 4 or 5 depending on what kind of English we're dealing with. The situation is further complicated though by the fact that some of these weak vowels, notably the schwa, can combine with consonants in a way that produces a phonetic output which is more complex, namely a syllabic consonant. So I hope there's something there that is of interest to those of you who are advanced students, and it wasn't too difficult for those of you who are beginning students. See you again in 2 days' time.